So this is the resistance report for day 468, and I want to say, as ever, everything you're going to see on this week's show has been published in the week since you last saw me. And for this week, it's the week ending January 16th, and that is 4 days before the scheduled pause in fighting that is supposed to happen on Sunday, should it happen. So just to give people that understanding, we'll take a look at the maps as ever to get started. Thank you to Tamara for guiding me through this the whole time. You can see the two key corridors there, the Philadelphia corridor and the Netzarim corridor in red. The ceasefire agreement involves the withdrawal from both of those corridors. You can see on the Philadelphia corridor, actually, let's put the next map up tomorrow with the zoom. You can see here on the zoom, the Philadelphia corridor at the Rafah crossing. Critically, the Israelis are to give up the Rafah crossing and allow that to be used for wounded people to leave, for a surge of aid to come in. And ultimately, the prisoner exchange element will happen out through the Rafah crossing. So the Rafah crossing has been sealed since May the 7th, a devastating result from that, of sealing Gaza's only way to the outside world, and having Israeli control over that is a giving up control of that is a key part of the ceasefire agreement, and something that the Palestinians refused to concede through this entire genocide on those principles. We'll get into the ceasefire after the resistance report, and we'll get into it in detail, what we know about it. Nora covered a little bit in the opening. And we'll do more of that after. But I just want to say, in what we're looking at here, Khan Yunis and Rafah, there were operations this week in Rafah. The Qassam brigades carried out an ambush of an Israeli position in al-Shabura camp in central Rafah. So even though the Israelis had drawn down from Rafah, there's operations still going on in Rafah. There's multiple operations in Rafah carried out by multiple resistance factions. There was an operation in Khan Yunis to capture drones. So even in the south, there's no videos from the south this week, but there were operations. And as we know, the videos only represent a small portion of the overall number of operations that take place. But there's significant ones this week that we'll take a look at, starting in the north of Gaza. If we go up there, we have, as Nora reported, 100 days passed on the siege of the north, the re-invasion of the north for the third time, focused on Jabalia camp and Beit Lahiya in particular. And over the last week, Beit Hanun, more than 5,000 people were killed, more than 10,000 wounded, 2,600 detained in 100 days. Dismantling of all three of the main hospitals in the north happened. And Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades, had a statement on the 100th day where he said, after more than 100 days of comprehensive destruction and genocide carried out by the enemy army in the northern Gaza Strip, our fighters are still inflicting heavy losses on it and dealing it harsh blows. We confirm that the losses in the ranks of the failed occupation army are much, much higher than what it announces, and the enemy will be defeated from the northern Gaza Strip, dragging its tails of shame without being able to break the back of the resistance. And the only achievement it has made is destruction, devastation, and massacres against innocent people. That is a consistent statement from Abu Ubaidah since day one of this war that we've watched. It's a war against civilians. The war on the Qassam brigades, on the military and militants in Gaza, is a failure. And that has been shown since the first day, and it will be shown right up to the last day, up till the ceasefire, should it come in place 4 days from now on Sunday. If we look at number one, you can see an operation here. The Qassam forces here, the commander is going to describe this operation against a command center that is the target. The red triangle shows that that's a command center for the Israeli forces in Jabalia city, Jabalia al-Balad. And this comes after, the commander says, after more than 10 days of field reconnaissance on the unit. And you can see the weaponry arrayed in front of him there. You can see the fighter here crossing the street with his weaponry. You can see him. This is a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 built thermobaric warhead. You can see all parts of it there, the rocket booster, the canister, and the primary charge at the front, which is to punch a hole in the wall. This is a uniquely 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Brigade's weapon. The second charge, the precursor charge that punches a hole in the wall, is only made by 𝐓𝐡𝐞, and they do that by filling the Yasin 105 cartridge with thermobaric fuel. And you can see the fighter there launching that. And we see from a second camera from the side, direct hit again. We've seen this all throughout the war. They're targeting a specific, you can see the overpressure of a clearly successful operation. And the fighter, the spotter says, it's lit, which is a line that they've been using all throughout the war. Famously, we remember the Islamic Jihad fighter said it when he was skipping after hitting a tank earlier on in the war. If we look at number 2, I brought the ISO of this because some people have asked throughout the war, why does the camera shake? If we watch this one just in ISO, you can see why the camera shakes. The backblast of the RPG is significant, and the fact that the fighters are able to sit beside these launches and get the camera work is very it's very operationally intensive to do, and they are actually very successful at it. As you can see, standing beside that, if your camera shakes a little bit, you could be forgiven. Some people in the comments, I know most people know the backblast on the RPG, but some people in the comments always say, why does the camera shake? That gives you a pretty good shot of it on day 468 of this war. So if we look at number 3, we're going to see a Yasin strike here against a tank. Again, you can see just the tank, the back of the tank. You can see it's going to give you a red triangle here in a second. So we're looking at the back of the Merkava here, sticking out of the rubble. We've got an elevated Yasin shot, and you can see immediately on this one, multiple colors of smoke, which indicates an immediate cook-off of the weaponry. So we're seeing a direct hit from an elevated firing position. You can see the smoke, the black smoke there, and then it's going to, the spotter is going to show after that it's continuing to burn. You can see that it's a different color smoke. So we're seeing the cook-off of the targeting of the ammo storage in the back of the Merkava tank. So you can see it again there. The absolute destruction and rubble is what the fighters are using to their advantage. The Israelis think that they have destroyed this area, and fighters are still accessing it through their tunnel network and still hitting their tanks, causing casualties. The Israelis took as many casualties this week as any week in the war. They took more than 15 casualties that they admitted. Like Abu Ubaidah said, their casualties never matched the field reporting. And we know there was dozens injured. And again, the Israelis don't count their injured properly, don't announce they're injured properly. So that's another successful shot. If we look at number 4 here, I can show you this. This is again the from War Thunder, but it gives you from the video game, which I don't play, but they have good graphics here, and you can see the orange canisters at the back. The containers there are ammo storage. They're actually a lot larger on the actual tank, and you can see the space in there. That's where the infantry cabin is. So there's open space in this video game. They had shells in there, but that's not how the Israelis use it. The Israelis use it as benches for an infantry squad. So you can have 6 to 8 fighters in the cabin of the Merkava, and you can have 4. That's in addition to the 4 crew that you see, the loader, the driver that you can see up front there, and the commander. So the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades are targeting the rear of these tanks, and you're going to see that again in number 5 here, where Soraya Al-Quds is going to use multiple EFPs. This is, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 calls them the Shawaz. Soraya Al-Quds calls them the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, which is the piercer. So they're explosively formed penetrators, and the fighters mouse holing. Still, we've seen this all throughout the war, able to move between buildings without going out into the streets. And this is what has vexed the Israelis all through. And I'll read you some testimonies after after these videos about the Israelis' reaction to these operations continuing, despite the fact that they've been laying siege to northern Gaza for more than 100 days. And this is the third major operation in the north. We'll remember back in the early days of the resistance report when I was telling you that the Israelis claimed operational control over Beit Hanun, and I said that wasn't true. It was clear from the fighters that it wasn't true, and now we are a year plus later, and you can see fighters still laying down. The graphics on the screens showing you the tank entering the ambush zone where the twin EFP, so one EFP is a devastating weapon, twins is particularly significant. And you can tell by where the targeting of this vehicle is that, again, they're targeting the rear of the vehicle rather than the front, which has loaded plates. This fighter says, "We have received news from field reconnaissance of a convoy of enemy forces advancing towards us, and we ask God for guidance and success in this operation." And here it comes. Here you'll see you've got the Merkava facing you. You've got a Namur troop carrier that has a population of 12 in it, driving in behind it as part of the convoy that the fighters said that they identified. Again, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance has been impeccable all through this war. So that's the rear of the Merkava. You can see that because you can see the chains. Those chains are protecting the turret gap at the back, which is the largest, and you can see the double um, detonator there, and the fighters can set these as tripwires, but the fighters don't. They want to press the button. They want to be involved in pressing the button. In many cases, in Jabalia camp, where this operation is, the fighters have been waiting for this battle. In between the battles, they've been waiting for it to happen, and they want to be participating. They don't want to set tripwires. They set them in buildings, but you see them consistently wanting to participate in them. And you can see the fighters sometimes talking to each other about whether to set a tripwire or press the button. The guys always say, no, we're going to press the button. Number 6 is a sniper operation. This is by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. I'm going to bring you resistance videos from all factions fighting in Gaza this week. And this is the Nidal al-Amoudi battalion of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. And you can see the sniper picks up an Israeli soldier there in the distance. And again, I've edited this out to match community guidelines that YouTube has. So you're not going to see the shot, but it is a successful shot with the Al-Ghul rifle, which is a copy of the Sayed 50 cal or the Austrian Steyr. And you can see these fighters here, again, working in teams, a spotter and a shooter. And there's the ambulance taking away the soldier that dropped in that successful operation by the Al-Amoudi battalion. So Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade's getting involved. This is another 𝐓𝐷 𝐄𝐿 operation. This is a sniper operation east of Gaza City that takes place. 𝐓𝐷 𝐄𝐿 is using an Al-Ghul sniper rifle here. We're at 6B. And again, you see the fighters with their setups inside the building, nothing sticking out, nothing shiny. Anything shiny is covered over. And you see them identifying here. This is Israeli soldiers in the buffer zone. So the reach of this weapon into the buffer zone, again, I edited that because we can't have the soldier drop, but he drops, and it's a successful sniper operation by 𝐓𝐷 𝐄𝐿. So Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades and 𝐓𝐷 𝐄𝐿, both with successful operations. There you can see the wall. So part of the ceasefire agreement is Israel will withdraw into the buffer zone, and that buffer zone will be 700 meters from the border until phase 2. And you can see they're well within range of that weapon. So number 7 is another return to sender operation. And this is what you're going to see is the next generation of fighters in Gaza are going to be armed with Israeli unexploded ordnance or captured weapons. These are anti-tank mines that the Israelis use to blow up houses. They use it for house demolitions as a cost-effective way to carry out their genocide, cheaper than airstrikes. You can see they have eyes on this position here. The fighters said that they've had eyes on this position for 2 weeks, which is, again, something the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and target acquisition, as the NATO militaries call it. That's certainly target acquisition, because you're going to see the arm of a soldier inside this troop position. And the Israelis claimed 3 dead in this operation and 9 injured, 5 critically wounded. Presumably in this operation, it matches the day and the location. This is in Jabalia camp. So reusing these weapons that have been used to devastate the Gaza Strip and applying it on the forces that are besieging them. So another return to sender operation by Țăranul al-Quds. Number 8, we're in Beit Lahiya. Again, they're able to fight in all of these areas that the Israelis are operating. You can see what looks like a newly manufactured Tandem 85 warhead, which is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 primary anti-tank weapon. You can see staring down the barrel of the Merkava tank here in Beit Lahiya. And the Israelis said the Israeli army, this is from Mariv newspaper, that says the Israeli army, this is from interviews with soldiers, the Israeli army is struggling to deal with the large number of explosive devices in Beit Lahiya and Beit Hanun. The Nahal Brigade and the 401st Armored Brigade operating in Beit Hanun for the past 3 weeks are paying a heavy price, with more than 40 injured and 15 killed. The army estimates that fighters have been preparing for a long time for the forces' advance into Beit Hanun and planting devices. So that's significant, because I've been talking about this throughout the war, that these fighters are not running around all over Gaza attacking where the Israelis are. The fighters are fighting in territorial divisions. So the Beit Hanun battalion, the Beit Lahiya battalion, there's 2 battalions in the Jabalia camp and 2 more in the city of Jabalia, and they stay in those positions. So for 100 days, or for 95 of the 100 days of the siege of the north, Beit Hanun wasn't involved in the fight. The Israelis weren't pressing into Beit Hanun. For 95 days, they were focused on Jabalia camp and Beit Lahiya. The day they moved into Beit Hanun, they were immediately hit. Within hours, they had 7 casualties from a significant operation. They are not running around and moving from place to place. So Beit Hanun exacting a significant price. And last week on the show, I showed you captured drones, new drones that were that we hadn't seen before, that were put in place by an Israeli Flotilla 13 Special Forces unit that was supplying troops with drones that made it appear as though they had run out of drones. I think we might have lost Tamara briefly here. Let me just double check. Oh, there we are. So this is, again, so now we're seeing back to back, seeing this drone, this Mera, they're calling it a Mera probe, but it's actually a drone that's put together piece by piece. You can see the Velcro on it. And on that screen, it noted that this was a multi-mission capable drone that has communications and GPS scrambling capabilities, that it is capable of intercepting enemy drones, and it was carrying 1,000 grams. You can see in those lung-looking things are 500 grams each of high explosive of C4. They're the lungs on the right-hand side there. And you can see those are the same drones I showed you last week. And that was the first sighting of them last week that we saw them. We saw them in Rafah, and there was a whole table full of them there. And now we're seeing them here. This is presumably in Khan Yunis. And the fighter says, the commander says that through a precise and complex security operation, we managed to thwart a hostile attempt against a displaced persons camp with this drone. The aircraft was found to be carrying explosive pods, each weighing 500 grams of C4 material. The explosives have been, they commandeered the drone in the air and took the explosives. And Soraya says the explosives have been transferred to the specialized units of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 to be utilized in the field. So return to sender. So these drones that we've only seen for a week in battle are already being captured at significant rates that seem to demonstrate, and I said last week on the show, because it's hard to know what the advantages of these drones are over the DJI, the G Chinese drones that the Israelis have been using. Possibly we're seeing it here that it can carry a kilogram of explosives, but we saw those drones carry a kilogram. We've seen those the G drones carrying the sharpshooter um, weapons to use them as, and they've seen them, of course. Nora's reported on those drones carrying speakers. So it's not clear what the need is for these new racing drones that you can see the battery pack on the back is velcroed on. So this is done by a veterans organization that is seemingly giving these drones into the soldiers because they need them. And I speculated last week because it wasn't clear what advantage these drones have over the other drones. In fact, they have disadvantages, that it suggests that maybe the Israelis are running low on their supplies. And people had asked me all through the war, are the Palestinians running low on supplies? And these drones seem to suggest that the Israelis are. We'll have to keep watching for it. But again, this commander, the head of military intelligence, commander in the military intelligence, is describing on scene what I said, that they commandeered the aircraft, they took the explosives, and the aircraft was on its way to attack a displaced persons camp. So the cowardly Israeli army putting explosives on a homemade drone to drop it on people's tents, 460 days into their genocide, that they have gotten $23 billion just in this year alone for weapons to drop on Gaza. But that's not enough. They want to make these makeshift drones. And again, you can see those are the two lungs that carry the explosives. So interesting detail. If the war is ending, I'm not sure we're going to get a satisfactory explanation for what we're seeing here. But those are clearly makeshift drones, racing drones, that don't have the same capabilities as the drones that they were using previously. If we look at the next slide, tomorrow, number 10, um, you can see again another haul, and those are the Mavic. Those are G drones, again, and you can see the size difference. The the blue one is the racing drone that the Flotilla 13 Special Forces gave, and you can see another one captured there. That one looks like it was shot out of the air. You can see the blades are broken, but the one in the previous video was landed, and the one in the videos that I showed you last week of those drones, they were all in pristine condition. The Palestinians GPS spoof and then land the drones. But here you can see that one was shot out of the air. You can see it's got no rotors on it. But yeah, this is a very interesting development. So we saw it in Rafah, and here we're seeing it in Jabalia. These are captured from Jabalia. And on the drones, here, the drones show the soldiers, and they all smiled. I edited it out. But if the Hind Rajab Foundation wants their full faces, they should get them, because these soldiers were joking around and they're all around their weapons, and they're going into Gaza to drop bombs off these homemade drones. So this is part of the digital footprint that these soldiers have created that has made it difficult already for them to travel. We're already seeing reports in countries of Israeli soldiers fleeing arrest warrants in those countries. And if there's a modicum of justice, that will be happening for years to come because of the crimes they've committed in Gaza. So just a note on Beit Hanun, there wasn't actually any videos out of Beit Hanun this week. They may come in the next week, but the Beit Hanun battalion was so ready. The commander of the battalion is Abu Hamza Fayed. He's survived the war and carried out his duties in the north in the Beit Hanun battalion for this whole time. Channel 12 Israeli television had a military embed because they thought that they had this area under control. So they were sending military embeds. I reported on that last week in Jabalia camp, where they sent Haaretz newspaper in. So Channel 12's correspondent goes in and he starts to talk to soldiers. Let me read you what he says. Testimonies from soldiers in northern Gaza. He says, the soldiers say, we are fighting in an environment monitored by cameras by the militants. They have planted devices, explosive devices, in every alley and are activating them from inside the tunnels. Their underground network is fully operational. We cannot see them with the naked eye. For a week and a half, there has been no direct identification of the militants. They have been completely they have completely planted Beit Hanun with huge amounts of explosives and remnants of our Air Force bombs. Every alley, every intersection is filled with state of the art cameras, 360-degree thermal cameras. They choose their targets carefully. They monitor the movements of our forces through the cameras. If there is a drone, they do not activate the bombs, but they wait for the military force to activate them. So the soldiers that went into Beit Hanun and they took 15, admitted to 15 casualties just this week alone, and multiple high profile ones that they couldn't hide. Um, and it was the Gaza division that initially went into Beit Hanun thinking that it was going to be an easy operation. They immediately got smoked, and the 162nd Division had to come in and replace them, and they got hit just as hard. The Sayeret Nahal, the spearhead company of the Nahal brigades, they lost 13 of 17 soldiers in their company, including the company commander and his deputy who would have taken over. Both of them were killed. And the Nahal brigade's overall commander, their brigadier general, the overall brigade commander, was a narrow miss in an attack on the command jeep. And it was a jeep in a convoy. And that's why you get these testimonies from these soldiers, because there was a convoy of jeeps, but the Palestinian fighters, Qassam, hit the command jeep, not any of the other jeeps. And so their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance is just all over these guys. And because they're not running around Gaza, they're in Beit Hanun, in the place where they live, where they grew up, where they know every area. They could be patient. And because they can be patient, they can wait 5 days, 6 days, and watch the Israelis get comfortable in these areas, and then they get hit. So like I said, the Sayeret Nahal Spearhead Company lost 13 of 17 soldiers, dead and wounded. That's dead and wounded. There was multiple days with dozens of casualties reported. One day there was 30 casualties reported, 13 critically, and like I said, at least 15 killed in this week. So, and we know Israel lies about their casualty report. So just remarkable fighting. And here's a report from 𝐓𝐡𝐄 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐨𝐧𝐢 that says fighters and officers report that the operation in the north of the Gaza Strip is not being managed properly. The size of the forces was less than required, and they were not sufficiently equipped with heavy machinery. The Nahal Brigade, they acknowledge, is an issue that has not been sufficiently addressed. The fighters are exhausted. They've been fighting continuously since October 7th, and the results are evident. The war is not being managed properly to desired outcomes. They're losing the war. They don't want to fight it. Their military can't keep up with the tempo of the resistance, with the preparation of the resistance in this besieged, tiny besieged territory with no resupply lines, building their own weapons, are making soldiers have testimonies like that, where its enemy, the Israelis, have supply lines all over the world, as Shir pointed out, are sourcing weapons from all over the world, are getting $23 billion just this year alone from the Americans. Um, and so this is just a really remarkable story. So that's northern Gaza. And I just have a few from the Netzarim corridor, which is also part of the withdrawal here. If we look at map number 15, we were lamenting the expansion of the Netzarim corridor under the ceasefire agreement. That is the ceasefire agreement of Yahya Sinwar. The Netzarim corridor will be abandoned by the Israelis. People will be allowed to return to the north without inspections, which was the criteria of Sinwar. And that has happened in part because the Netzarim corridor has been under fire by the Palestinian resistance every single day since it was established, and even before that, because the Juhar al-Dik axis was one of the first axes to get resistance, and that's where the Israelis came across the border to try to hold the Netzarim corridor, was the source of the first operations of this war. So number 16 is, and again, I'm going to get everybody in here. Every faction's going to get in here. This is the Popular Resistance Committees and the PFLP, the Nasser Saladin brigades and the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades. And there's a trophy 60 millimeter Israeli mortar here that they're going to fire. The sign says, "We do not surrender. We win or we die." And the second sign notes the date of the operation and their flags. Again, Popular Resistance Committees and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, both groups participating together in mortar operations that look small, but these are essentially fragmentation grenades, bombs that are being sent that are deadly, and the Israelis have to set up installations to protect against that. So you can see them both there. And then number 17, we have so those you can see there just before we switch, those are Israeli mortars. So number 17, again, this is the Popular Resistance Committees and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Also, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Martyr Omar al-Qassam forces participated in striking the Netzarim corridor this week in an operation with Saraya al-Quds. Saraya al-Quds multiple operations against the Netzarim corridor as well in there. These are 107 millimeter rocket artillery. Again, they've seen these being fired all throughout the war. They'll be fired right till the last day. When the Israelis moved into Beit Hanun, all of these launches were from Beit Hanun, right under the Israelis' nose. So 17B is the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. So the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades are involved in this with the Popular Resistance Committees as well. And they put the Netzarim corridor under pressure for this entire war. And the Israelis want no part of keeping it in this ceasefire. They intended to keep it in the ceasefire agreement. There's more, you can see there, more captured Israeli mortars. So these fighters are capturing the mortars and returning them to sender still. And again, the fighters acknowledging that it's victory or martyrdom. They're fighting to the end. They do not surrender. They will not surrender. And that has been going on throughout this battle. And then he launches his mortars. And you can see in other videos where they set up their mortars, they're not just random. They're doing it. They're using artillery geometry, artillery math to set up their firing positions. And because the positions of the Israelis are fixed, the fighters can move their positions and still have the coordinates for hitting the Israelis. And number 17C, just two more here. We got this is the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade's Nidal al-Amudi battalion, and you can see here how they set up the coordinates using the string line and the geometry from their artillery math, and then they set it up. So this gives us a good shot of all three parts of the operation that we usually see. And this is an operation dedicated to Nidal al-Amudi, who was assassinated by the Israelis along with senior Saraya al-Quds commanders in a targeted assassination in the Shati camp on 14 January 2008, exactly 17 years ago to the date. And you can see the sign there that they've put up to commemorate this. The sign says, Abu Hassan, you have planted. It says, within your memory is a promise. We will stay on your path. You planted men who are protectors of the nation, and your memory in us is our resistance. And so they set this up for, this is the Al-Amudi battalion firing, and you can see the landing there. They have a spotter. A lot of the mortar teams don't have their spotter. They don't want to give up their spotter position, which is why we don't see the other side of the mortars. And just one more, 17D. This is Saraya al-Quds and the Jihad Jibril brigades. This is the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command, PFLP-GC. So we haven't had the Jihad Jibril brigades in for a while, but this last series of operations, we've brought in every resistance faction that's in the joint operations room. And maybe during the ceasefire, I'll show you some videos of the joint operations room training before the war. These guys did not just wake up, roll out of bed, and learn how to fire rocket artillery and use their geometry to get on target. They trained. All the factions trained together under the lead of the Qassam brigades. And we've focused on the Qassam brigades throughout this war because they are effectively the national army. And these other brigades are in support and work under the umbrella of the Qassam brigades. So that is the resistance report for day 468, 4 days before the ceasefire goes into effect on Sunday as is scheduled. Hopefully that is the case.